Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Life Well Lived by Amabala Stephen. It's an engaging and enlightening talk show on life, relationships, and the business of life. Grab a cup of juice and just chill. Life Well Lived by Amabala Stephen. Live life. Live fully. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. We really appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further. Here is your host.
It's good to have you on the show once again. This is Amabala Stephen. You're also on Live Well Lived by Amabala Stephen. My podcast focuses on self-development and personal improvement topics with the occasion of incredible expert and professionals who come to the show to share insights subject to topics on the personal development. Now, I have Tahmina Watson on the show, who is an immigration attorney with Watson Immigration Law. Hello, Tahmina Watson. Welcome to Live Well Lived by Amabala Stephen.
Thank you so much, Amabala, for having me. I'm so honored and grateful to be here.
Thank you, Tahmina. So honored to have you on the show. And also, I'm looking forward to your professional insight, especially on the topic of immigration, right? Immigration law. Now, Tahmina, immigrants and refugees face challenges in the U.S. So what is the present administration of Joe Biden doing in this regard?
That's a really good question. Now, I'm going to take us back just a few steps before I answer that question. So President Biden has been in office since January 2021. It's about 9 months at this point. If you think about the categories of people, you're asking about two different types, which is always conflated as one. So the refugees are people who are leaving their country because there's been some sort of climate issue or a political issue, and they are, getting processed by the administration's refugee department, and they come here with permission to live here. Okay, then there's the second group, which you hear about in the news all the time. They are people at the border who are fleeing different types of persecution and trying to come into the US to really protect their lives. And those people are generally asylum seekers. So when you turn the news channels on, you're hearing about the Afghan refugees, you're hearing about the Haitian immigrants, you're hearing about a lot of different pockets of people or categories of people, and often they are conflated as one. In America, they're treated very differently. So the laws are separate as well. So let's take the Afghan nationals that are coming in. The Afghan nationals that are coming in at the moment are coming on generally on what's called parole. They're not refugees. They're coming here with permission to be here, majority of them. A lot of them had green card applications approved for being helpful to the US government. And so they had different types of pathways to getting here. Now, they are different from the refugee population, and some people may be coming in as refugees. There's just a different way of processing people. And so what has President Biden done so far? So when President Biden came into office, the immigration system was already broken, extremely broken. And what has happened since is that this broken system is being pushed upon incessantly. So in my opinion, he's doing what he can to create systems to have immigrants come to the US. Now, the system is so complex and so broken that it doesn't appear that much improvement has happened yet. It's because everything is so complicated. So he is trying to make sure that there are better systems for the Afghan refugees to come in. And I'm using the term refugee as a broad way to describe them. He is also trying to figure out how to get people who are coming to our borders to get here safely, not just for them, but for also the American people. And so there's just an awful lot going on. So when you hear the news, it may seem like not much has happened, but in reality, these systems that need to be put in place are time-consuming and complex to put in place. But he has increased the cap, the number of refugees that can come into the US. If your listeners follow news on immigration, they may know that the previous administration had lowered the number of refugee admission to such a small number, almost like they couldn't come in. And so that number has been increased again to its normal levels. And I forget what the numbers are at the moment. So in general, to answer your question, it's a very complex situation. And it means that the solutions are equally complicated, but work is being done.
Tahmina, good to know about that. So let's talk of global migration. What are the challenges and the responses?
Yeah, wow. That's something that I'm sure a lot of people would love to talk about because, what we saw in the last 4 years is that the very fact that climate change is an issue was not being regarded as an issue. So we had to fight through the last 4 years. Is this climate change real or not? But of course it is. It's demonstrated by the fires that are happening in California. It's demonstrated by the cyclones that are happening in Puerto Rico and other parts of the Caribbean. It's being demonstrated by the drought that's happening in different places. The demonstration is in so many ways. It is real, and people are being displaced from their own countries. So it is an enormous challenge. The solution, in my opinion, is not just the solution that America put in place. It's a solution that I believe that the countries of the United States have to come together and have a global solution to it. Because, one of the things that COVID has taught us is that we are all connected. Even if it doesn't appear so, we are all connected. So something that had happened in China with a small virus has now affected the entire world. If that is not proof that we are all connected, then I don't know what is. So taking that example that we are all connected, this solution has to be a global solution. Now, I can only talk about immigration laws in the United States. And so in the United States, I think the first step truly is to increase the refugee numbers, which it has done, but we need to increase it even further. We also need to potentially have categories for climate change refugees. Right now, if you think about asylum seekers, there are only 5 grounds: political opinion, nationality, religious, beliefs, social category, and I forget the other one. But climate change is not one of the asylum seeking issues. We need to create a climate related category for people who need to come to the United States. We are a big country. We have space. We need people. And obviously we need people is a controversial issue depending on which side of the aisle you're on. But in a simple term, Amawala, what we need is a global solution so that countries in different parts of the world that can take on refugees and take in refugees can actually come up with a solution. It needs to be coordinated. But America particularly needs to create climate-specific refugee solutions, and we don't have that yet.
Now, Tahmina, I want us to just get a little bit personal here. So when exactly does the person need an immigration lawyer?
Oh, such a good question. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of immigration before I answer that. Immigration law in the United States is broken down into family-based immigration and employment-based immigration, and then all the humanitarian categories, similar to what we just talked about. When it comes to family-based immigration, it means that you are a parent, a spouse, or a child sponsoring a child, a spouse, or a parent. You can also sponsor a sibling if you want, but those are the immediate relative categories. Now, how quickly those are processed depends on the relationship and how far it is. So if you look at a dartboard, I imagine, what I tell my clients, imagine a dartboard. And in the dartboard, the center, which is black and round, that is the closest relationship and the quickest to process. So a spouse of a US citizen, a parent of a US citizen, minor child of a US citizen, they're in the little black hole in the center, and they're very quick to process. As the relationship furthers out, so a child over 21, a child who is married, a child of a US citizen, or if you're a green card holder with a spouse or a child, minor child, you're sort of on the outer skirts of that dartboard. Now, if you're a citizen and you want to sponsor a sibling, that sibling is on the very outskirt of that dartboard. And what this means is that that's how long it's going to take. There's a lengthy process for each of these categories, depending on how far you are from the center. There is also the category is further divided by the country you were born in. So countries that have large populations, India, China, Mexico, and Philippines, where a lot of population are coming to the US, those countries have longer waiting times. But other countries like the UK and many countries in Africa, South America, the waiting time is only how long it takes to process in that sort of, dartboard analogy that I mentioned. Now, when it comes to employment-based, the categories are, if you're in the center, that is called EB1, first preference category. That's if somebody won a Nobel Prize or an Oscar, or, you're so good at your job, you're extraordinary, or you're transferring from one country to another as a manager, and you're trying to get a green card. The category that's further out from the center are if you have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, or you don't even have a degree sometimes. Those are EB1, 2, 3. And then if you invest $500,000 or $1 million, you're EB5. And so the center is where things are generally the quickest, and it takes longer and longer as you get further out. So these two general headings, employment-based, family-based, they can be very complicated. And in the olden days, and when I say olden days, I mean pre-Trump era, things were simpler than they were now, meaning that if you were filing for a parent or a child or even a sibling, the application process, while not necessarily very difficult, is tedious, but you could very much expect what will happen next. But what happened over the last 4 years is that the procedures all have been stifled. They were the system has been broken down. Cases that used to take about 6 months now take 12 months or more. And then obviously in 2020 we got COVID, and COVID completely stopped processing. And what that did was the simple things became very complicated. People were stuck in the US when they didn't want to be stuck in the US. People were stuck outside the US when they didn't want to be stuck outside the US. How do you bring them back, or how do you let them go out? How do you maintain their immigration applications throughout that process? So you need an immigration attorney, because the process that is ever changing, the law doesn't change necessarily, but the procedures and processes change frequently. That's where you need a lawyer to come in and help you. Otherwise, your case could be closed, abandoned, denied. You could be stuck outside the country or inside the country, depending on where you want to be. And the immigration lawyer knows how to go through that maze of complexity. And what we find is, even when something new happens, and each lawyer is sort of struggling with, oh my gosh, what's going to happen after this? The immigration lawyers community is actually very collegial and friendly and warm to each other. And so we're always helping each other figure out, okay, well, this is a new thing. This is the next thing we need to do.